Welcome to Bridging the Gap. I'm your host, Audra Carter. Bridging the Gap aims to inspire and empower unity within our community. On today's program, we will explore the following question. How can we coordinate local community, neighborhoods, and local churches to participate in certified response team planning? Also, what can we do to empower people, local churches and groups, the community with the necessary tools to handle a situation when help is not on the way? Our guest for today's show is none other than Commissioner Marie Young. You know, I like to think that I'm one of her daughters. She has so many in the community. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you so many, again.
And thank you for Janice Gilgore. She is the Public Safety Director at the Escambia County. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And of course, you know him. This is a local police guy, Captain Alexander. He works for the police department. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And welcome to all of you, our guests on Bridging the Gap. You know, the very interesting thing about pulling this group together is that Katrina did a lot of things. It brought up a lot of feelings, and it brought up a lot of gaps. And as you know, one of the biggest gaps is insecurities, fear. How do we handle that? And we've had many shows and talked about many aspects. But I think as I go to conferences around the community, one of the biggest questions that everyone ends up discussing is, what happens when help is not on the way? I believe as a parent, it's probably one of the most fearful opportunities for growth for our community. And today, these individuals thought it important to come on and talk about it. Why? This community is close-knit. And sometimes we just, we forget to kind of go over the script. And as a teacher and as a principal, sometimes we need to do a review.
Yes.
And I would say that safety is probably one of the most important things, because when people feel safe, you can calm them down. And I kind of coerced them to come on and be with me today.
Well, Audrey, you know, you did a great job. And one of the best things you could have done was to invited your teacher so she could have the principal so you can have the teacher to come. Janice Gilgore is a very special person in our community, and she is Director of Public Education, Public Safety. And of course, anything that has to do with emergency has to come through Public Safety Director for Escambia County. And we're just happy to have her here. She can tell us what happens before FEMA, before anybody shows up. What should we be doing?
Well, you know, we've heard for years. I can remember as a small kid here listening about being prepared, drawing up the water in the bathtub, making sure you had extra canned goods and things that you didn't have to have electricity to cook with. Those are all still true today. We have to have enough to take care of our families for that 3 or 4 days in the event the federal government doesn't get here. If we don't, then people are out looking for food. And unfortunately, we saw some of the bad things that are associated with that in New Orleans after Katrina, because those people were desperately needing to get food and water. And they were doing things that they normally would not have to do.
And one of the concerns that came across was the disconnect. We heard the radio, and some places had no radio, some had TV and no radio. People actually got fearful that they were going to be left out. And I think that one of the most important things we need to do today is to help. And I asked the question to you, Commissioner Young, and our safety person, you know, is there any extra things we can do as we dissect and take a look at the good things that we're doing? And yes, I commend you greatly for all the great work that you have done. But insecurities in local communities, when they are disconnected, as you know, in Katrina, people all of a sudden became leaders, like overnight. Yeah. They weren't before, and we're talking about gangs, we're talking about children, we're talking about people with experience in disaster. But if it were to happen in our worst of it, or Katrina here, are we ready? Can we handle it in our local communities that we can't reach, that people don't talk our same language, they don't have the same kind of sensitivity to reading, that they don't read, they don't do the bathroom? Are we ready? And I pose that.
Well, I think, you know, you mentioned the community response teams. I think that's key, Because if you know your community, who best to deal with it, then you know if your neighbor left, or possibly if they went to a relative's house across town, so you don't waste time meeting them or worrying about them. So many people after Hurricane Ivan talked about they met their neighbors for the first time.
Exactly.
Well, that's not the time really to meet your neighbors.
You're
Now's
right.
the time to do that and to find out what you can do as a community in a coordinated effort to make sure you're taking care of each other until that help gets there.
Now, understand she's coming from the position of organizing and knowing. But if the truth be told, none of those people knew each other until Ivan blew those gates down.
That's right.
Right.
So I have to pose it to someone who's a politician, who knows about the church community, and she knows how hard it is sometimes to bridge the gap before it happens.
Well, you know what, Audrey, I was just thinking, most people feel comfortable at the church.
Yes.
This is where they go to feel safe. And I noticed since Katrina, we've had more and more churches developing these kinds of response teams. And I think that's where we need to focus now. We need more churches to develop those response teams. We have churches now getting together, even going to Mississippi,
They certainly are.
Alabama, and they've really taken hold of things. But I think it was during Katrina, we had an opportunity, I believe we had about 25 or 30 pastors to meet with us in one of our local churches to kind of give them an idea of how all of this comes together, starting with Janice being our public safety director, coming before the county commission saying, hey, we got an emergency, how that little emergency is penned, and we carried them through the whole process. And as a result of that, we've had more churches to develop people within the church, a response team to check on the elderly, to check on children, to find out where you're going to go if something happens, you know, and who is not capable of being moved, such as your special needs people. I think Janice has the responsibility of being sure, is that right, Janice?
Working with the health department.
With the
right.
health department. And you know, to have all of our ministers, they have a monthly, weekly meeting. And we've had an opportunity to even talk with them about some of the things that they could do in their churches to be sure that everybody that's attending that church knows what to do in case of an emergency until somebody shows up, you know. So I think we're on the right track.
And
I
I
really
think-
do.
And I think what she described is an embodiment of a good situation. And I've discovered there's a roadmap. And a roadmap, the Bible has one. If we do things decent and in order, if we're trained and equipped, if we take some pre-planning,
Yeah.
and then a lot of prayer. But the challenge is that some places don't have what you just described. And we are really in disconnect still in our communities. And what you describe is a great model, I believe, something that is totally workable. But Janice, how then do we bridge the gap? You know, how can we infiltrate these enclaves of people who don't go to church, who are on the street corners? Is one of the concerns that I ended up hooking up with Capt and Alexander, because I believe what you have in our police department and in our United Government military is I know when Ivan came and this shook Tate High School, it was real nice to see those Marines standing up there, because I just knew the roof was going to come off, that they are pre-trained, and that there are many reserve workers, many retired people in many, many churches around the community. This is a call to what exactly Commissioner Young is saying, that guess what, guys? These people know this works. Here's the disconnect, is that they're not involved. They're not totally enrolled in the process. And for Katrina, that was devastating. I believe that every place has a plan, but when it doesn't get to the people, we got to kind of rethink this thing.
That's the key. I mean, exactly what you're doing here, education, talking about it, bringing the issues out up front before there's a disaster, because in the middle of the disaster, it's very, very difficult to do. The things that Captain Alexander does through community programs and neighborhood watches, those are all things you build on. And you basically are having to be very proactive, not reactive, and making sure that people realize that it is something that they can get involved in. Takes a little time, doesn't really take a lot of effort, and really doesn't take a lot of money. it just takes some of their time to learn their neighborhoods and learn the things they can do to make them a little bit safer after disasters.
And can I share something with the community? And I don't need Janice or Marie Young to say this, but sometimes you have to say it to children. I care. You care. Not because you're the position, but because you're Janice.
Yeah.
And Marie, that you know, you were down there having to sleep on the floor just like us.
Right.
You know, that you care.
Yeah.
Fundamentally. And I like to talk to them and say, we care because we care.
It's our community too.
Yeah.
Our community too. And it's not like we're talking up here and you guys are down there. It's like we are in this together. So why not talk about the fact that we care means a response on the other side? And I'm not so much talking to you and Commissioner Young, because you do that, that's your job, but you do it when nobody's looking.
Right.
You know, you help people with food. I know Commissioner Young, she come right on her point here. You know, and she always has much of it. And when you get down to those humanistic kind of things, we got to talk about some of the things I'm going to ask Captain Alexander to address, those pockets in our community where you simply can't go. They speak a different language, they live a different way, most people would be afraid. We really have to kind of leave it to the people who are with those people every day. And I'd like you to share with us, I mean, you do a good job every day being Captain Alexander, but when I put you on the spot and made you do this, you know, Janice was saying earlier, gosh, this looks very much like our certified response team, which means like minds think together. But that's nice to have a program, but what are your thoughts on how to really germinate it into take it to another level?
Well, you know, in looking at the various plans, countywide plans, that have come even prior to Ivan, they really point out a lot of the needs that the various communities have throughout Escambia County. But one of the things that's very prevalent, and I think Katrina really brought that out, is that there's a serious gap. A lot of people don't know the services exist, or they can't get to the services, or the services can't be brought to them. So I saw in one of the county's comprehensive plans for long-term recovery was talking about adding additional community centers, because the community center in every neighborhood gives you access to information and also gives the service providers access to feedback from that community. So you can pretty much on a regular basis assess what the needs are, and then get that information, whether it's training and education or disaster preparation or even disaster relief. You're able to coordinate a lot better with those community centers being in place. And it also allows a place where multiple faith-based organizations can also come together and work as a team, because one of the things you find is that people are working, you got a group here separated, a group here separated, and all our efforts are separated by various barriers. So the whole idea is to come up with a comprehensive plan that ties everybody in, what they can do, what they do best, and then let's see where the gaps are. And we have a lot of retired military experts that have been involved in disaster relief efforts. It helps the public safety's lift the public safety's burden to respond to those immediate emergencies when you have a community, even a small neighborhood that's been trained to sustain until additional support and help can move in.
So you're saying that this is definitely a probability, this is doable?
It's doable. It's very simple, because you don't need to recreate anything. You have neighborhood watch groups, you have neighborhood associations, you have community center, community leaders that can step up and be the advocate to get this information. You know, one of the programs that is being utilized through United Way is Citizen Corps, where they're encouraging volunteerism, not only in law enforcement, but in all phases of public service. They're encouraging volunteerism. And so volunteers can help fill in areas where you may not have. You may have a neighborhood that's predominantly elderly, and you don't have anybody with the energy to get out, but then you can take the volunteers and go in and teach the preparation that they will need, because every neighborhood will have some similarities, but they also have a lot of differences. So you have to come up with a plan that is unique to that neighborhood, but it actually ties into an overall plan.
How long does something like this take to implement? I guess I asked Janice.
I hear what he's saying. Some of this is already in place.
Right. You're right.
And I heard you say that the Red Cross and United Way is built on volunteerism.
Right.
And I think you're saying we need additional volunteers per neighborhood, more or less.
Right.
Strange you say that. You talked about the community centers. The county is now preparing to build a community center in an area, I believe it's over in the Oak Crest area. What is that, Ebonwood?
Right.
And it's being designed to probably so that when we have an emergency like a hurricane, that staff can be there. It's going to be built to withstand certain, levels of wind and et cetera. And we're planning another one over in the Wedgwood area. And those are the two areas that we could certainly spend a lot more time in terms of providing for that kind of service that you're talking about.
Well, and I think if we make the efforts as we can.
Yeah.
I mean, because I remember in the plan it mentioned places like Southwest Pensacola, the NAS area, mentioned Woodland Heights, which is actually in the city, and I believe a recreation center was in the neighborhood plan that the neighbors and the city officials had came up with. And so even in the design of these centers, if they're designed with a multi-purpose goal, both in times of emergencies as well as in times of meeting the community needs in terms of services and education. And you'll find as we are able to put these centers in place, then it can cut down on a lot of the unnecessary traveling immediately after a disaster, because people are desperately trying to get services and resources, and it's easier to bring to distribution points.
And that was one of the problems that we had, I believe, in the last hurricane, wasn't it? I think the state had wanted to reorganize its efforts in terms of bringing in the ice and water. They wanted it there in 24 hours, and we weren't ready to have that kind of service in every community within the 24 hours. So we had to look for spots. And that's what we're working on now to try to alleviate. Hopefully we'll have stations already in place, so that when within that 24-hour span, we would be able to serve people, that's in that area. So
well, that's what when
Audra
asked me what would I do if I was to put together a plan. Well, the immediate thing crossed my mind is to have a representative from that neighborhood, that area that you have made some prior contact with. You've made some prior training arrangements or agreements as this is how it's going to go. If all the phones and electricity go out, this is the plan. As soon as you can get to this point, and if we don't find you, we're going to come looking for you. So then you have your backup contact person, but then you would have an assessment to some degree as to who to expect to be able to have to bring services or resources to from each neighborhood. So it gives you a kind of a ballpark figure, at least what you would have to immediately be able to respond with.
Well, let me show you something I discovered after Ivan. While we were trying to get the ice and water, communication was like crazy the key. When people didn't have it, they couldn't get on the phone and they couldn't talk to anyone. It was shaking. And I want to talk about communication because communication comes on different levels and different people hear you differently. They could take something I said and totally change it around and it's something else. And when we're in a crisis, boy, we need the most clean and clear communication as possible. And we need communication that is sensitive to different people. I would like to put something to all of us today to think about. The program that Captain Alexander, the real reason why I have him here is because I didn't want to reinvent. Bridging the Gap is not about creating new stuff. It's about being a conduit, a facilitator, if you will, to find stuff and just kind of help merge and gel it together. And yes, I pray over it and I do my hocus pocus or whatever I believe God has me to do. All I want to see is it going down the track. He has a great program, for instance, and you find gaps like this all around the community where people are trying to finance them all by themselves. He has an audience that's already there. I've been on the shows 3 or 4 times. They call it like that. That's hard to get. I mean, you know, people who really follow you. Oftentimes, though, when other people don't know it and the funding runs out, we lose that important piece that it takes us so long to get. I submit to you today that programs like what he has should not fall to the wayside due to money. For all the reasons, it should not. And I think that what Vernon Watson's doing over there on WBQP TV, I had a motive for asking him or Captain Alexander, because I would like to put this baby somewhere. Now, I don't want to bring anything to either one of you and then don't have a plan in place. And some way of communicating it effectively that we can track, and that we're sure that if something does happen, we have a means of communication where you can get it directly to. I think that what he's done there at the program on WBQP TV is a great place to start talking and seeding. And we did that last night, and we got great response from the community. So what do you say, Mom? How you know something is good? You got to just put it out there.
Yeah.
And so we have a full circle of how we got something already in place.
Right.
We got the city working together, and we have people who already bought in. This partnership is already there, and a lot of people don't know that or think that. They really don't think that you guys care. One of the reasons why Bridging the Gap is here is to say, they care, you're just not listening. You got to pay attention. This is about your life, too. You have to have buy-in. You know, you guys can do all you can, and if people don't listen, if they don't pay attention to their own families and take ownership for being a part of this, they're going to, I swear they're going to tell us that we never did a darn thing. And the truth is, we're trying to make it happen with the existing things that we have. In the last 4 minutes that we have here, if you believe that the concept could work, and you were talking to the masses of people, if we had another hurricane on the way, what would each of you say?
One thing we've been trained to say is we're ready. And I think we're ready because Janice is our director of public safety, and she has a plan, and it has to be renewed ever so often. And of course, you know how good she is. She went all the way to Washington.
That's right, she did.
And had an opportunity to share it with the congressman there. But we work pretty hard in trying to be sure that everybody in our community is aware of what needs to be done. And of course, have we fallen by the wayside? Maybe somewhere. Maybe some people have not been touched, but it's always our efforts to continue to try to reach out and touch everybody. I want to commend the Captain Alexander for the hard work that he's done, and certainly his idea of the crisis response team can work and will work. We just need to work together to see to it that it can be going. Okay.
Communications, like you talked about, that's the key. Realizing that you don't take no for an answer. You know, when you need something, you keep plugging away until you get it done. And paying attention to the local media outlets. We feed them from our operations center, so get you that portable radio and listen to it in times of disaster. But outside times of disaster, ask those questions, the hard questions. If we don't have the answer, we'll tell you we don't have it, but we can certainly look for it.
And thank you so much for representing us so well.
Thank
and
you.
being tenacious. You know, people say, well, why would a Janice or a commissioner you want to come on a show? Because they're real people who care about real things going on right now. We need to not be so hoggish, I'm going to just use that word, about how we communicate and give. These people are really about serving our community, and I like the realness in you, and thank you so much. Captain Alexander, you got 30 seconds.
Okay, I would just say, if you're listening, get involved, because if you're not involved, you can't possibly know what the plan is. And of course, when a disaster comes and you don't know what the plan is, then you have every reason to panic. So get involved. That's what community problem solving is all about, is the community getting involved to find out what the solutions are and having an idea what the plan is going to be.
Now, the whole purpose for this show is to tell you that from the top, from the down, from the middle, and in between, we have the plan, it's in place. We have some of the best leaders, in the world with us to implement the plan. But we have a missing ingredient, and that is you. Because no plan is good without followers, about people who will commit to be in those local communities where you don't read, you don't go look at TV, you don't do anything. That's when we need you the most. You're the most important ingredient, if I would say so myself. So we'd like you to open your mind's thoughts and think about how you can participate in this program. It's nothing new under the sun, just a great idea to add to what we have to make it better. Isn't it nice that we can go to leaders like one-on-one and say, what do you think? And they go, sounds good to me. And people to carry it through who are already equipped to make it happen. You know, I always enjoy doing stuff like this. And I think one of the things that God has given me is the ability to know when to serve others in a way that empowers our community. And see, that's all for now. Be sure to listen to me on WRNE Radio. I have a show called Bridging the Gap. It's 5:30 to 6:30. And what we hope to have as a parlay from here is the gentleman who's in charge of the Certified Response Team with Janice Gilgore. And we'll go in more depth about how to work those plans. We hope to have Captain Alexander back with us and anybody that can help us get you the information that you need. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you again. I'm Audrey Carter, your host of Bridging the Gap.